We begin the current Daf, Masechtas Yevamos Daf Ayin Zayin. We begin 16 lines down from the top of the Yomim. But the Gemara continues the discussion for the halacha of Amayni or minus, which the previous mission was as a continuation from the previous mission before that, regarding B'tzur Daka, regarding those as it relates to Truma, and that got us into discussion that regarding certain individuals as it related to Truma, into those that are Psuli Kal, which that was the theme of our previous mission, which we spoke about the people of a Gerim from Aman and Moav are going to be Asur Lav L'Kal, they cannot marry a regular Jewish person, and then as that relates to the females of those people. Today's Daf. Something is discussed in today's Daf are Binyan Av. Binyan Av is otherwise known as Mamatzinu. It's one of the Yidgim Amidah Shatur Nidreshim, which is if you find this principle one place, you could compare it to another place unless there's a Pircha. Tzad Shava is when there's two different sources of a halacha. You can't say each one of the characteristics is the reason because the other one doesn't have the characteristic. It must be the common denominator. If someone who has at least a common denominator will also have that halacha. Regarding a Maini who did an Isra and married a Yisraelis, we'll see in the Gemara Machlekes regarding the status of that child for Guruna. We had said in the Mishnah, Mitzri V'Adoimi Inna Asur Me'elat Shleisha Daris. And we had a machlekes regarding this prohibition of a mitzvah nedami for 3 generations. Is it echad zkarmech nekevis, or Rabbi Shimon says that no, the nekevis are permitted right away. So we begin the current daf. 16 lines down at the top of the amud. We mentioned in the previous daf on the top of this amud 2 different sources for the halacha of amayni v'aloy amaynis and amoyavi v'aloy ma'avis. And the Gemara says yes, it's kitanoi, that those who learn out from the word amayni, which means v'loy amaynis, and there are those who learn it out from a different source, al devar, like we brought that, because the Torah tells us the reason why we don't let them marry into the Jewish people. Because they didn't bring the bread, they didn't bring the water for the Jewish people. And we said that who's the type to do that? That's only men, not women, so only the men got punished and not the women. We find those 2 sources actually as in the following brisa. The brisa says, the Rebbe says clearly that's the source. It says in the masculine, in the male, that it's amayni and not amaynis. Whereas Rabbi Shimon, he brings the other source, the pasuk in the bar. It says in the Torah, why are they not allowed to marry to the Jewish people forever? Because they didn't come and bring you bread and water. This explains Rabbi Shimon, who's the way the norm is? A man is that he would come out, women not, and therefore women were not punished. Now, continuing regarding this discussion, or about the permissibility of an amoinis and mo'avis, which we mentioned on the top of this amid, regarding this halacha, where they wanted to go ahead and make a problem for David HaMelech and say, oh, he's from Ammon, he's from Moav, and he's not let him marry into the Jewish people. He said, no, it's only for the males, not the females. So Derish Rabbi expounds a well-known pasuk, Ma'itachsiv, Pitachto le'moiseir. You opened up my moisaves. Moiser is a strap that you tie the yoke with. So what does it mean, Hashem, that David was saying that you opened up my straps of the yoke? So I'm going to double the Baruch Hu, David said about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boy, Shem asked the world, Shnei moisaves shahayu alai, the 2 straps that were on me, pitachtem, you opened them up, meaning because you permitted the females of the forbidden nations. So they were like straps, but Hashem untied them, which is Rus HaMoyaviyah, V'nama HaMoynis. Rus, we know, as it says in the end of Megillah Rus, we're going to learn in 2 weeks, this of his ancestor of Rus. Additionally, Nama was the mother of Rechava, the wife of Shloimo HaMelech. From out came the Davidic dynasty, was through Shloimo, through Rechava, and Rechavim's mother was Nama HaMoynis. So they were both from the forbidden people of Ammon and Moav. But Hashem opened up the straps because the females of those nations are permitted. Similarly, another drush of Derish Rabbah might have said, wasn't in a pasuk in Tehillim. Rabbis asisa ata Hashem lekai. Much did you do, you are Hashem, my God. Nefleisecha machshvesecha eleinu. Your wonders and your thoughts are on us. So well, wait a second. Elai le'nemar, it doesn't say on me. Ele eleinu, rather on us. Meaning on me and on Rechava, my grandson, you thought for the good. The Lama comes to teach Rechav Yesha B'Chekesh Al David. Rechav was sitting on the lap of the Zayd of David HaMelech, and Amalai, he said to him, Alai v'alecha nemrush te mikrois halalu. He says, on me and on you were said these 2 pesukim, when Hashem permitted the females of Ammon and Moab, Zayda said to the Einikel, oh, it's into the glick. This is what Hashem did for the two of us, and this is where out came the Davidic dynasty. Similarly, another drasha, Dadish Rabbi expounds, Ma'adav Sib, what's in the Pasuk in Tehillim over there? It says, Oz Marti, this is over there in that same parak. Then I said, Hine Basi b'Megillah Sefer, behold, I have come with a scroll of a book, Kosav Alai, that's written regarding me. What does this mean? So David says, Ani Marti, I said, this is what it says, I had originally said, when I was anointed to become king, that Ata Basi, that now I was coming for the greatness. It was just now decided that I should become king. Lo yadati, I didn't know Megillah's Sefer Kosav Alai, that actually, that in the scroll of the book was already written on me from the days of Avram Avinu. Where do we find this? It says, Hasam Ksib in Bereshis, it says, when it says that the Malachim were pushing late, saying, let's go take your wife and your two daughters, that's where one of them was where Moab and Ammon cut, and the other one's where Ammon comes from. Hanimtsa'is, that are found over here, maybe you're going to get gathered with the sin of the people in the city of Sudan. That's one pasuk about Avram Avinu. Hachik, it says in Tehillim, Matzasi David Abdi, I have found my servant David, which Rashi points out, although David is saying this, but he said with Ruach HaKodesh, B'Shem and Kodsh Meshachta, with the anointing oil I've anointed him, which is that you see the same word Matzasi is said over there, that Hashem already had thought about David HaMelech already in times of Avram Avinu. That Hashem who saved the two daughters of Lot, which is where Ammon and Moab come from, all because of David. So David thought right now it was decided. No, this was decided many generations before. Amar Ula, going back to the halachic discussion of our Mishnah, Amar Ula Amar B'Yichin, it says, Baz Ger Ammoni, which literally translated as the daughter of an Ammonite Ger. Now, the assumption of the Gemara right now is we're talking about a person from Ammon who converted with his wife, and then they got impregnated and gave birth, what's called B'Kedusha, and when they were already Jewish, when they were converted already. So that daughter is going to be Ksher L'Kehuna. It's going to be valid for Kahuna. So on that, I'm going to rub about Ula Ula. He says, come on, who is this going like? And as the Gemara explains, Ikar Yehuda be going like Yehuda. Ha'amar, he says, we had this enough in Zion, that Baz Ger Zachar, the daughter of a male convert, meaning any Ger that's a Zachar, meaning he converts and he has a daughter, Kabas Chol Zachar, is like the daughter of a male Chol. They're both Jews, but their children are apostle for Kahuna, as the Gemara explains in Perek Asar Yochsin. This Machlek is Rabbi Yehuda Reis. He's also in Perek Asar Yochsin. So according to him, obviously the daughter would not be kosher Kahuna, because any Ger that's a male, in contrast to a female, any male that's a ger, his daughter is forbidden for good. And Vikar B'Yasi, Pshita, Ha'amad, this is what his teaching is. Av ger shenasa geyeres, even when a ger marries a geyeres, bitik shei l'guna. The daughter is valid for guna. So what's the chiddush? He's saying a bas ger amoni kosher guna. Not only if he, let's say there's Ammon that ger marries the Israelis, even if he marries also geyeres, and they're both gerim, even there Rabbi says the daughter is kosher guna. So what's the chiddush? And the Chita would be going to say, oh, I'll tell you, it's going like a Yasi, but I would have thought to say, Bahanach doing Lona Bakal, maybe it's only by a someone that's fit to marry into the Jewish people. That type of ger, a regular ger, can marry into the Jewish people. Abul Hai, but a person from Ammon, the Indra Lona Bakal, he cannot marry into the Kilo. I would say, Loi, maybe his daughter would not be Kasha Bakuna. Says the Gemara, but Manole, where do you get this idea from? That whoever told us such an idea that because someone's not fit to come into the kahal, his daughter is going to be puzzled more than the other gerim. Since the females of those converts of Ammon and Moab are mutervas, so why would I say that the daughter would be puzzled for kahuna, that I needed this teaching to be like a B'Yasi to say that's going to be kasher b'kahuna? Of course, a ger and the gears, they get married, Rabbi Yisrael is kasher b'kahuna. And if you're going to say, says the Gemara, oh no, because the Yalam, we learn out from a Kohen Gadol married to Almana. And since he's not fit in this Almana, so his daughter is a Chalal and Pasal for Kuhuna. So therefore, that's where I'll see that, yeah, you could have someone that's Mutrulav Kahal, the Kohen Gadol, but still his daughter is going to be a Chalala. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Malak Kohen Gadol Almana? What are you learning from Kohen Gadol Almana? She can be Yasa Ba'avera. There's that union of a Kohen Gadol when the Torah says it's forbidden. What are you going to say with Amoini, the marriage Amoinis? There's no sin in that Bia. So why would you say that the daughter would be forbidden to Kuna? Then again, I need you to tell me that she's Muteres to Kuna, that she Ksher to Kuna. Says the Gemara, no, because Chalal, a male Chalal, is a man that his parents had a forbidden union, his father was a Kohen married, let's say, Gerusha. So that Chalal, Yechiach, will prove that he's permitted to marry a Bas Yisrael. There's no sin when he gets married to a regular Bas Yisrael. And yet his daughter's going to be possible to Kuna. So I could say the same thing by the Ammonite. Says, well, what do you mean? But Malachal, what are you going to compare to Chal? Again, Yitziyasa Ba'avera. The formation of that Chal himself, the Tata, was formed in sin. Because his parents had sinned when they got married. What are you going to say with this Ammonite, where his formation was not in sin? There was nothing wrong with that. Says, well, no, but Kohen Gadol Yechiach. Kohen Gadol would disprove that that's not the primary principle, because the Kohen Gadol, his formation, the father was not in sin, and yet his daughter from the Amon is going to be apostle. So obviously you cannot tell me the principle is because Biyasa Ba'avera. You can't tell me the principle is Yitziyasa Ba'avera. So B'chazar Adin, so this is where the logic goes back. This one's characteristic is not like this one's characteristic. And this one's characteristic is not like this one. So this is what we call that when you have a halacha principle and neither one is the defining characteristic, you find what's the common denominator. That they're not by the majority of the kehillah, meaning they're not like the majority of the Jewish people, because each one of them has a deficiency. The Kohen Gadol with the Amana, his bia is in sin. The Chalal, his Yitzira was in sin. And the Amoini is not right level B'kol, that we know. So if we find by those two, Upita B'sula, the door is going to be possible. Afkan, also by the Amoini, She'en the B'rev Kol, who's also not the majority of the Jewish people, because he can't marry them. So therefore, Upita B'sula. So therefore I would have said that the door is possible. That's why I needed the teaching of Rabbi Yechanan in the Shitas Rabbi Yossi to tell me that the daughter is going to be kosher b'kuna, because I would have said that she can be possible b'kuna. Says Gemara, wait a second, still not a necessity. Because what do you tell me? I would learn that from a tzad hashava? It's not true. Mala tzad hashava. And what do you find by the common denominator of both them? Shkein yesh ben tzad aveira. They have an element of sin. The daughter of the Kohen Gadol, she was formed in sin. The daughter of the Chalal, the formation of her father was in sin. What are you going to say by the Amoinis, where there was no sin, not by her formation, not by her father's formation? So obviously, Pasha doesn't need kosher. I don't need the Allah of Rabbi Yechanan to tell me anything. I would never have thought to say a tzad hashava, because there is no tzad hashava. I mean, there is, but it's not, that would not qualify for that of the Amoini. So rather says the Gemara, Dilma maybe, and the Gemara takes that with Vada, maybe definitely, but for sure, Ba'amayni shenosa bas Yisrael kamret. Maybe you, Rabbi Yechanan, was talking about halacha by an Amoini, not like we thought originally that the couple, the Ammonia and the Ammonite couple, converted and then had a daughter. No, it was Amoini that married a bas Yisrael. And the chiddush is, Avagav b'yaseh ba'aveira, although that marriage isn't sin like we know, state in Torah, Amoini cannot marry a bas Yisrael, even though that there was a sin, Bituk Sheva, the daughter is going to be valid. Amalei saw that. Ula said to his son, he said yes. That later on the Gemara is going to ask and find out, so what is the source for this halacha? We learn that from the word me'amav. But yes, the Chiyasad Rav and Amr, the Girsa takes out the word Rabbi Yechanan, that he said, Bas Ger Amoini, Bas Mitzri Sheni, regarding the daughter of a Amoini Ger, and the daughter of a second generation Mitzri, who, if either one of them married a Bas Yisrael, and therefore their bia was in sin, obviously, because a second generation Mitzri, and Amoini forever, is not like married Bas Yisrael, they have a machlekes. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Kesheda. So again, this is, you see, that's the halacha Rabbi Yechanan was set on when the marriage was in sin. Rabbi Yechanan says kosher, Shlokar Shom Psula. Shlokar says it's going to be possible, as the Gemara explains. Shlokar Shom Psula says it's going to be possible. Why? You have to learn Kohen Gadol B'Amana. He learns out from Kohen Gadol B'Amana that just like Kohen Gadol B'Amana, where the daughter is going to be a chalala, where you see when the marriage is in sin, the daughter is a chalala. So also over here, the Amoini marries a Bas Yisrael with that in sin. The daughter is going to be a chalala. Bicha says, no, it's going to be kosher. Why would that be? Seemingly Rish Lakish is correct. You see from Kargol Amana, where the marriage is in sin, the daughter is a halala. So it's a continued with base. Because the Tani of Zakai Kamed Reb Yechna. What the Gemara means to say is, from this klal, from this rule, we'll learn out that we see Reb Yechna holds that the child's going to be kosher l'kohuna. Because Reb Zakai taught in front of Reb Yechna the following brisa. Says a pasuk in Vayikra. Says, Ki in besula me'amav yikach isha. On the Kohen Gadol it says, he has to marry a besula, a virgin, me'amav, from his people, he should take a woman. What's the word me'amav? Says the brisa lehibi giyoris mikana. Coming to bring, to include a giyoris, a female convert, from her base. In other words, that her father and her mother are from one people, and she was born in the state of kedusha. That such a woman she ksher lekuna, that she's kosher for kuna, meaning excluding a ger amayni that marries a bas Yisrael, where that's not mikana. Why? Because since that bia was in sin, so the daughter is going to be possible. That was the brayso Reb Zakai taught in front of Rabbi Yechon. Has to be me'amav, meaning from her base that her parents are both the converts that are permitted. But if let's say it's a amayni marries a bas Yisrael, then it's made possible. That's what he told him. The Amalei Rabbi Yechon said back to him, Ani Shaina, I learned Amav, May Amav. Meaning, what it means to say is, it could have said Amav, could have said Besulas Amav Yikach. It doesn't say that, it says May Amav. What does May Amav come into? What's the mem? To tell you even from Niktas Amav and another people. What's that coming to include? That's coming to include Lahavi Besula Haba Mebeis Amam. That's coming to include a Besula that comes from two different peoples. It's Mei Amav, not Amav, Mei Amav, because it's partial from one, meaning to say that there's another one. And you're telling me that only a Gieres from Kana, meaning from her base, meaning that they're both from the same and nothing more? So the Gemara explains. What did Rabbi Yechon mean when he says that there's two nations that the Kohen Gadol can marry this woman if she came from two different nations? If you think it's an Amoyni marries Amoynis, what do you mean? So then what would that mean, two nations? So I'll tell you what that would mean. Amoynim could be called two nations because the Scharam Asurim and the Kevas Mutaris. We know the males are forbidden to marry to the Jewish people if they convert. The females are permitted. So it's like two people, it's like two nations. Problem is, Hainu Gieres Mikana. That is a Gieres from her base, meaning where her parents are all from the same nation. Ella, rather, obviously what Rabbi Yechon meant to say was, V'amoyni shenasa bas Yisrael. When the Amoyni marries a bas Yisrael, where it's from two different nations. And from here we see that Rabbi Yechon is saying, I teach, not like your brayso teach me. I teach, even if it's not Gieres Mikana. I teach from Amav me Amav, that even if it's only partially from one nation and partially from another nation, that is going to be kosher. And therefore it's different than Amon the Kohen Gadol. You can't learn like a Shlakish to say that the daughter is going to be a halala, because you see clearly from this pasuk that even if it's from two different nations, even if it's, let's say, from a ger who is forbidden, let's say, that marries a Yisraelis, that the daughter is going to be kesheda l'kuhuna. That's the source that we said from Rabbi Yechon. Now, Vikadam, those who say that actually he told them explicitly, which is going to have a ramification. Amalei, there's a different version that says like this. Rabbi Yechon responded to Rabbi Zakai was, Ani shoyna amav me amav. I learned that it could have said amav. Instead it says me amav. What's that coming to tell you? Lahavi besula haba mishnei amam. It's coming to include a besula that comes from two different nations, meaning from Yisraelis and a ger. Now that ger is the me'am sheyesh bo shnei amam. It's from a people that has two people, so it's like a double understanding of the word. Meaning me'amav is teaching not only that when it's from two different nations, but it's that nation itself has two different nations, which that's the Amoyni, like we said before, which Amoyni has two different nations in a way, because there's Chagam Asurim and the Kevas Amatova, so it's almost like it's two different nations in that nation itself. And you're telling me that you could only, a Kohen Gadol can only marry a Besula that's Mekana from her base, meaning that they're both from the same people and nothing more? That was how Rabbi Yochanan responded in the second version. So the Gemara asks, wait a second. So then, according to this last version, that Rabbi Yochanan explicitly told him that he's only including from Me'amav, the daughter of Anamoini that married a Bas Yisrael, because you're telling me it's a people that in itself has two people, that's what it's coming to include. So Bas Mitzri Sheni, so then the daughter of a second generation Mitzri who married the Yisraelis, when their Bia is in sin, because again the Mitzri Sheni is not married to the Kehil yet, you have to wait one more generation, to say that the child is going to be mutter for Kahuna, we would know that's going to be kosher. Meaning, according to the first version, was any two nations. This forbidden ger with this Bas Yisrael. But according to the second version, he's doing like a double meaning. It's a double Shnei Amamim. And that's only referring to Ammon and Moab. That doesn't tell us anything regarding Mitzri Sheni. So according to the second version, how would you know that even there, the Bita is going to be kosher to Guna? We're going to say, okay, the Yolav Ma'amoni Shanas Basil, you learn out from Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael, where it's the same idea. It's like a forbidden ger that marries a Bas Yisrael. No, it's not true. You can't. Because Mala Ammoni Shanas Bas Yisrael, what are you going to say by Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael? Because Shekin the Kabers, there's certain leniency, although Ammon and Moab is actually very severe, that they're forbidden for forever, but they're females, the Ammonis, Amutaris, are permitted right away. What are you going to say by Mitzri Sheni, where although the Torah was lenient, it only goes to 3 generations, but the Torah is machmir that the females are like the males up until 3 generations. So how do you know? Maybe over there we actually will not permit the daughter to kahuna. So it says the Gemara, mitzvah sheni shenosa mitzvah shniyach. What do you mean? A second generation mitzvah marries a second generation female mitzvah will disprove that, because their daughter is kosher for kahuna because she's a 3rd generation. And even though there's a severity factor, like you said, that it's coming from the mitzvah, and even so it's going to be permitted. So I'll also include over here when you have a bas mitzvah, when you have a second generation mitzri who married Israelis and has a daughter, because since she's a 3rd generation, she'll be kosher for kahuna, just like a mitzvah sheni that marries a mitzvah shniya. So no, mal mitzvah sheni should also mitzvah shniya. What are you going to say? A second generation mitzvah that marries a second generation mitzvah is she can't be about there. There's no sin in that marriage, so therefore the daughter will be kosher for kahuna. But when the Mitzri Sheni marries a Bas Yisraelis, which is a sin because he's also loved b'ka'al, who said that the daughter is going to be kosher for kahuna? So you go, well, yeah, Ammoni shnas a Bas Yisrael yichir. When the Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael, where his B is be'avera, and yet still the child's kosher for kahuna, will disprove the problem of being a sin. And therefore the logic goes back and forth, and therefore the tzad ha'shavash is that they're not b'rei b'ka'al, and the daughter is kosher for kahuna, so too a daughter of a mitzvah sheni to a Yisraelis is also going to be kosher for kahuna. That's how the second version will know not only Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael, but also mitzvah sheni marries a Bas Yisrael from a tzad ha'shava, from mitzvah sheni and mitzvah shniya, and of Ammoni shnas Bas Yisrael. That is obviously not the word of that it's muteres, or because you see that you have by Ammoni also an avera, and it's not only a din in Ammoni, because you find by mitzvah sheni and mitzvah shniya from the tzad ha'shava you could learn that also a mitzvah shenasa Bas Yisrael, that the daughter is going to be kosher b'kuna. Now Rabbi Yisrael, he says, "Hainu d'shaman le'Rabbi Yehuda." This is what I heard from Rabbi Yehuda. The Amud that he said, "Amav mei amav." Chab gehel the gave him a drasha, and he says it state mei amav and nishna amav. I didn't know what he was saying. What was the drasha was saying? But now I know. He was coming to say why it's kosher the daughter of an Ammoni that married a Bas Yisrael. Now, however, it says the Gemara Kiyasser Rabbi Shloimy Yehuda Amar Hachi Tana. This is how Rabbi Zaka taught Kamei in front of Rabbi Yehuda. That Isha Ammonis is very cryptic teaching that he's quoting him. That is what he said. Isha Ammonis Ksheira. And the Gemara is going to explain a different version of what the story was from the top line of this Amid that we had quoted, what Rabbi Zaka taught in front of Rabbi Yehuda. This version of Shmuel Yehuda is very different. It's more cryptic. Isha Ammonis Ksheira. An Ammoni woman is kosher. Bena me Ammoni, her daughter from Ammoni, is going to be possible. Ubita me Ammoni, and her daughter from Ammoni is going to be ksheira. Says the Bryce of Mamed. Remember when we say this, if the person from Ammon and the Ammonis, if they converted. Ababita ma'amoni b'sula. But her daughter of an Ammoni is going to be apostle. That's the brisa. Now, Amalei, Yevamos said back to Reb Zakkai, Puk tani levra. Go out and teach it outside. And he explains why. He says, my da'am, this said, the first that he goes through one by one. This said, you said, Isha Ammoni is ksheira, that an Ammoni woman is kosher for the kila. You're right. That's correct. Because Ammoni v'le'ammonis, we know the drasha tells us only the Ammoni people from the males are forbidden, but not the females. Fine. The second halacha you said also, B'na me'amoni apostle, her son from Ammoni is going to be apostle. You're right. Because the Ammoni, because he's not Ammoni person, his children are forever forbidden, because Ammon goes on and on. Obviously, the man's children forever is going to be apostle. So that's also correct. Now, however, the third halacha, Ubita ma'amoni kashera. The third halacha was said that her daughter from the Ammoni man is going to be kosher. For what are you talking about? If you think is that he can marry into the kila, how can you say that? What do you mean? Hashta, if now Ima, her mother, who wasn't even born to Kedusha, you said Kisheira, meaning we know that the Torah says, so her daughter, which was born in Kedusha, I need to tell you that the bita is kosher, meaning, what are you telling me? Obviously, cannot be talking about that we're saying that the daughter is kosher for the Kehila, because the mother who was an Ammonis is permitted. She was a legitimate, she was born an Ammonis, and when she converts, she's permitted. So the daughter from converts themselves, for sure that daughter is going to be kosher for the Kehila. Ella, rather, what are you going to say? Makuna. Must be that you tell me that the daughter is kosher even for Kahuna. Okay. But then you continued and you said, when we say this is regarding a male and female Ammonin that converted, and they had a daughter, where her formation was not in sin, and she's a Giyoris Mikana. She has both parents that converted from the same people. Avol Bita Ammoni, and then the brisa ends up but a daughter of an Ammoni is going to be psula, meaning psula from what? From Kahuna. Says the Gemara, my Bita Ammoni. What does it mean her daughter, this Ammonis convert, what does it mean her daughter of an Ammoni? Elim, if you think it means her daughter of Ammoni Shenasa Ammonis, how could that be? Haine Giyaris Mikana. That's the Giyaris from Kana, from her base, which you just said a moment ago in the Reisha, Bita Ammonis Kasha. So it can't mean an Ammoni Shenasa Ammonis. Ella, rather, obviously the Sefer that's saying it's going to be possible is by Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael. It must be talking about, not the Ammonis that we were talking about in the Reisha, must be it's a Bas Yisrael that married an Ammoni. Oh, that Bia is in sin. That's forbidden. Torah says an Ammoni cannot marry Bas Yisrael. And that, you're telling me the Bita is going to be possible, and that is what Amalei, this is this version of Rabbi Yechon telling Rabbi Zakkai, Pok Tani Lebra, go and teach us outside. Because not true, that case is also kosher, because I teach, as we said this already on the top of the Amid, instead of saying Amov, it says Me Amov, which validates the daughter of the Ammoni Ger that marries the Israelis who is from two different people, and even in that people is two different people. The Zecharim of Asurim and the Kevis are permitted, and that such a union is permitted. Again, this is a third version essentially of what Rabbi Yechanan, just reinforcing what we said in Nomen Aleph, that he says that this case of Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael, that the child is going to be kosher l'kahuna, that's what the halacha was said for that purpose, and that's why he said go teach us outside, because it took a while, but we had to explain that that's what the Brace was telling us, that the daughter is going to be possible for kahuna when you have this forbidden marriage of Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael. And Rabbi Yechanan says not true, because I'm not like the Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and therefore he said Puktan L'Bara. Now he said in the Mishnah that Mitzvah Adaimi, the Egyptians and the Edomites, we had this on the Mishnah, we had a discussion. The Mishnah told us the opinion of the Tanna Kama that it's same males and females, but it's only till 3 generations. Shimon said no, the females are permitted right away. Shimon says a Kabbalah. If we find by the Ammonites and the Moabites that the Zecharim have been forever, and still in the cave is permitted right away, So when the male is only forbidden up to 3 generations, isn't it a kabel chayma that we should permit the females right away? So they said to him, look, if it's halacha, which Trace explains doesn't mean halacha mashmasina, but like that's what you received the tradition from your Rebbe, will accept. But if you're trying to tell svara, we could refute your svara. And he says, no, I'm telling you halacha. That's how we said in the Mishnah. So that's what the Gemara says. My tshuva. What was the retort? What was the response that the Rabbanan had to Reb Shimon's kabel chaymer to say that if you're coming from logic from kabel chaymer, we can refute it? So Amar Rabba Babachon Rabbi Yochanan says Mishum Dikla Meimer, because you could say that Arayis Yechichu, the prohibition of intimate relationships, will disprove the logic of Reb Shimon, because Shaloi Osben Elat Shleisha Dairis, the prohibition of intimate relationships only up until 3 generations. Meaning, as Rashi explains, one's granddaughter is forbidden to him, and he's counted as 3 generations. So it's him, his daughter, and his daughter's daughter are 3 generations. Now that's echad zachachim echad nekevus. That's both males and females, because we make his daughter's daughter like his son's daughter, which we see that even though it's only 3 generations, it's going to be the females also. That's exactly like by the mitzvah. Up until 3 generations will be males and females. So don't tell me kabel chaymer from the amoyin amoyin that you see that although those chayim have been forever, so then the females are permitted right away. So mitzvah for sure, also the females should be permitted right away. It's not true. You see by Arias that the females are not, although the males are only forbidden up until 3 generations, the females are also going to be forbidden up until 3 generations. Says the Gemara, yeah, but Mala Arias, what do you learn from Arias? She can kares. That's because there's a punishment of kares when one has an intimate relationship with one of the close relatives. You can see with mitzvah and which is only a positive commandment, because it says in the Torah, "Doi shlishu yabalhem," a 3rd generation that could come, which excludes the 1st and 2nd generation. But that's what's called avabal machlal asay. So therefore, maybe we should not make the females like the males. So maybe Reb Shimon is correct. Says, well, yeah, but mamzer yichiach. Mamzer will disprove that where there's no kares by being intimate with a mamzer, and yet still he makes his daughter like his son, which his children, whether mamzeras or mamzer, they're all going to be forbidden. So you see that it's not an element in kares. So therefore, the Rabbanan were correct. Says, yeah, but mala mamzer, what are you going to say? How are you learning from mamzer? She can't love bakal oilam. A mamzer is never permitted to come into the kila at all. Whereas by mitzri, it's only up until 3 generations. So how are you learning from mamzer? So yeah, but Arayis will disprove that. Where Arayis are permitted to the whole Jewish people except for the relatives, and yet we see that the females are forbidden. So this is what's called b'chazar adin. So the logic goes back. This characteristic of the Arayis is not like mamzer. The characteristic of mamzer is not like that of Arayis. But what's Hatzar Shamash about? Again, we want to learn out the common denominator that we find that the females are going to be forbidden for 3 generations. Hatzar Shamash and Shasurim, they're forbidden. So whether males or females. Okay, after the Evi mitzvah, so I'm also going to bring the mitzvah and mitzvahs. You assume that they should have been in whether males or females, and therefore that was why the Rabbanan said, Reb Shimon, you don't have a kabel chaymer, because I can bring you other sources to show you that although it's only up until 3 generations, like by Rayas, that still the Isser is going to be on the Nekebus. And you can't tell me a kabel chaymer from the Amin Amayim people that, the females are mutter right away, and there it's Asr forever, so for sure we should permit the females right away by mitzvah. Also, it's not true, because I proved to you from the common denominator of Arayas and Mamzerim that the Isser could be for females. Said the Gemara, but yeah, Malatar Shavashan, what do you find by common denominator? There is an element of cars. What do you mean there's an element of cars? What do you mean? Mamzer, if someone's intimate with mamzer, is not going to be cars. Yeah, but the mamzer himself, even though there's no cars having be with him, but there was cars in his yitzir, in his formation, where he was born from a woman that was forbidden to his father by a punishment of cars. So that's how he became a mamzer. So well, yeah, but for Rabbana, what they would tell you, the reason why they say that yesh tshuva, and they would refute Reb Shimon, is because they would learn up mechalol d'chiyah ve'aseh. From a chalal that comes from a punishment of a positive commandment. For example, let's say Kohen Gadol marries an anusa or a mafuta, a woman who was raped or seduced, which for the Kohen Gadol is only forbidden in the positive commandment, because she's not a mono, she was never married. It says besula yikach, which teaches us besula is a positive commandment and not a beula. As Rashi says, there's no lav of zaina, although she obviously had bia once before, because no one holds the bia of panuya is nus, only with the law and Allah is not like him, like the Gemara says, on Daf Samachal B'Meves. And Ukrim Eliezer ben Yaakov. We're going to go to Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says over there on Daf Samachal that the child is going to be a chalal, even though it's only from a prohibition of Mechiv Aseh. So that's what the Rabbanon were asking Reb Shimon in our Mishnah. They were telling him, Arayis Echich. Arayis proves what you're saying. Because you see, Arayis is only up until 3 generations and the females are also forbidden. And that the question is, but not Arayis, what are you learning about with his cars? And that's what they say, Chol Dechiv Aseh Echich. Not like we just said regarding moms, because near then you have a Tzad Shabbat that has cars. No, we could be Mechiach from a Chol of Chiv Aseh, where there's no cars, and still the daughters just as forbidden as like the son. What are you going to say? How do you learn from Chol? Where the formation of the father was in sin, and therefore you made the females like the males. Because they're the parents, their formation was not in sin, and yet still the granddaughter is just as forbidden as the granddaughter from the son. So you see that the Nekevos are like the Zecharim, and therefore they said to Reb Shimon, look, if you're coming from logic, we could refute it. It's not a Kavachem from that of the Ammon and Moed. So then says the Gemara, okay, umay loiki. So what was Reb Shimon's response? Which was, loiki sounds like that, no, your response is not a response. You don't have a refute on the Kavachem. Says the Gemara, this is what he was talking about. It's actually 2 parts to his response. Lididi, according to me, says Rabbi Shimon, I don't hold Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, meaning there is no chalal from just a chiv aseh. Meaning if a Kohen Gadol marries an anusa or mafuta, which is only an aseh of besula b'lei ba'ula, the child would not be a chalal. And you also cannot ask, as Rashi points out, from a chal of chiv alavan, because you could say, meaning even though he would agree that a chal would be from chiv alavan, that's a gerusha, a kohen hedges, because over there it has a lav. What are you going to say to compare it to mitzvah and ademi, where it's only positive commandments, not so severe? Maybe Reb Shimon would be correct, and we would not make the indicators like this chal. So what would you say from Mechiv Aseh? But he says, I don't hold like Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov that there's a chal of Mechiv Aseh. But l'ditchu d'svir l'ru Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov, you hold like Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov that there is a chal of Mechiv Aseh, and then you want to say, aha! So you see that you could learn out that even though it's only Mechiv Aseh, we're going to make the indicators like this chalim. Says on that halach aliyah. Regarding that, I have a tradition from my rebbeim that the females are permitted by the mitzvah. So he was saying 2 things. Loi ki is saying that no. First of all, I can refute what you're saying lishitasi, but regarding lishitas that I cannot refute it because you have a good tzad hashava from the chol v'chivasei. Regarding that, it says I learned from my rebbeim not like you that the nekevos are permitted. The time we learned the brayso, Amalek Shimon said to them, halacha aliyah. But first of all, I'm saying over halacha that I have a tradition from my rebbeim. Additionally, I have a pasuk that supports me. How does the pasuk support me? Because it says in the pasuk, "Banim." The pasuk says, "Banim asher yivoldu dar shlishi." By the Nitzru, it says a 3rd generation Yovlem b'kal Hashem. What do you see from the word Banim? Is v'lei banais, but not the daughters. Meaning, only the sons are going to be permitted by the 3rd generation. The daughters are permitted right away. So this pasuk also supports me that the daughters of the Egyptians are not forbidden. Now, turn about me actually in the Brisa, that's actually machlokes how to translate this. The Tanakh says Banim v'lei banais de Reb Shimon, which that's Reb Shimon, like we're saying. Reb Shimon says that the daughters are permitted right away. It's only the sons who need the 3rd generation. But Amr Yehuda says a different taich in the pasuk. He says Hadei the pasuk says Banim asher yivoldu dar shlishi. The sons that are born in the 3rd generation, they're permitted to marry to the Jewish people. Hakasav Talain Beleda. The pasuk is making it dependent on birth, which Rashi says 2 translations. Meaning, it's saying that all those that are born to them, which sounds like even a female. Meaning, why saying Asher Yivoldu Lam? Of course, the 3rd generation is born. If you're saying Yivoldu, you're saying anyone that's born, which even a female. So you see, no, to the contrary, females are forbidden up until the 3rd generation. Or another version Rashi says is that when we're saying it Tlon Beled, that means to say we're making the sons dependent on the mother who's giving birth to them, which obviously the mother is the first and the son is the second. Now, if the females are not forbidden, so why would you make it dependent on the one who's giving birth, which is the mother? Obviously, you're saying that the mother is just as forbidden as the sons, and therefore that's the only way it can be permitted. That's the 2 versions. But either way, that's Rabbi Yehuda's response back to say you don't have a source from this passage. But interesting the way the Gemara ends. Rabbi Yechon says, "Ilav da Amr Yehuda." If not for Rabbi Yehuda having said, "Hakasav talo'in beledom," that the pasuk makes it dependent on birth, and therefore the nekevos are also going to be aser, not like Reb Shimon. If he wouldn't have said this, he wouldn't have found his hands and feet in the Beis HaMedrash, meaning he would not have been able to stand by his teaching. Why? Because Kivan al-Amar, Rabbi Yehuda has another teaching, brought him Masechtas Kedushin of Ayin Gimel Aleph, that he holds Kahal Gerim Ikri Kahal. The Kehillah of Gerim is called the Kehillah, meaning it's considered part of the Jewish people. Now, if you would say that the females of the Mitzrim are like Reb Shimon, that they're permitted right away, that would make them Kahal. Now, the problem is, a Mitzris, that's a first or second generation Mitzris, would be forbidden to a first generation Mitzri. Because a Mitzri, you're telling me, is only permitted a third generation to marry to the Kehillah. The Mitzvahs, you're telling me, if you didn't have this drasha, would be permitted, it would be like Shimon, permitted right away. So then, as the Gemara continues, the top of Ayin Chesed and Aleph, Mitzri Sheni b'mayitar. How would you ever get a Mitzri to a third generation? What would purify him to get there? He cannot marry the Mitzvahs. Can't marry Kal Gerim. There's no one left. Taisa discusses why. Say Shtuki. Taisa has a few different options, but the Gemara says he would have no one to marry. So therefore, obviously, at least now he saved grace by darshing. You're saying no, that really they're also forbidden up until third generation, so then they can marry each other until they get third generation. Because if not, you would never have that yichaylis. The Torah wouldn't make sense. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Maybe the Torah is talking about that if he violates the Isser and marries, let's say, Bas Yisrael or Giyaris, that's where you'll have a third generation. So what he's saying, he wouldn't have Yodam B'Dag Beis HaMedrash. Does he mean no? The E is something that has to come through a sin, like Kasav Kra. The pasuk not come to tell you that the bonim they're going to have through Averis, that third generation, because it's not common to get to that third generation, because they wouldn't do Averis. Says he, what do you mean, Hari Mamzer? The whole halach of Mamzer is the E. It's all about that he wouldn't be a mamzer only because his parents sinned. His father had to be with chibuk krisis. And because the pasuk tells you lo yav mamzer, even though it's not common, you still need the pasuk to write it. And when it does happen that you should not get intermarried with that, so you see, the Torah does mention the e. It says, the e li yisur kasim. The e of if someone's going to do an avera of now there's a prohibition related to it. That the Torah will write. But the e lehetera. But a DE, which is for a heter, for example, a third generation, like Kasav Torah wouldn't have written. It says, what do you mean, how you have someone remarrying the woman he divorced after she already married someone else. Which, DE, lehetera, bekasve, because the Torah writes in the Ram Chavdalim that Kisa Ebi, that's an abomination to remarry the ex-wife that had married someone else to remarry her, which is forbidden. Now, the Gemara in Kedushin of Ein Zaman Aleph Darshans, Kisa Eva, he is an exclusion to say she's an abomination, but her children are not an abomination, meaning coming to tell us that the children are permitted. Wait a second, the Torah is coming to tell you Di'i lehetera, coming to tell you something that is a nevera, but to tell you that a heter of the child will come out of that. Says, well, yeah, that's not true, because the Torah really was primarily trying to tell you that the mother is forbidden. She's a te'eva. You're right. Agav Gerada of when we mentioned the Isra of Mavzei Girush Asay, Teich de Bareinu, we're going to say that the child's going to be permitted. But the primary reason was of Isura, and therefore again, Rabbi Yehuda needed to say that the Mitzri wives are going to be forbidden, and therefore they're not part of the Kehillah, and that's how it's possible for a third generation, because or else the Torah would never have written a Di'i of the Hetera. And therefore, from the fact that the Torah tells us, obviously there's a permitted way for them to get there, which is by a mitzvah who marries a mitzvah. Thank you to any time.